This episode is sponsored by global sports and entertainment agency, Octagon. For more than 40 years, Octagon has delivered award-winning campaigns and led sponsorship strategy, experiential programs, and athlete partnerships for brands like the Home Depot, Delta Airlines, MasterCard, Nutrafol, and NBA 2K. The agency drives impact across women's sports and major global events such as the World Cup and the Olympics. Learn more at octagon.com and on social media at Octagon.
Hi, I'm Dina Lykos with AdH Studio 30, and welcome to a special edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast. Today, we're diving into how brands can unlock deeper meaning through the intersection of sports, entertainment, and passion-based marketing. And there's no better person to explore this with than Lou Kovacs, who is the president of marketing for North America at Octagon. Lou brings more than 2 decades of experience in sports marketing, sponsorship, and experiential strategy. Since being named president of marketing in 2019, he has overseen Octagon's North American marketing and events businesses, spanning everything from sponsorship, consulting, to creative and technology. He also leads relationships with many of Octagon's largest clients, guiding integrated multi-market programs that leverage sports and entertainment to drive measurable results. Over his career, Lou has led award-winning campaigns for some of the most influential brands across automotive, tech, beverage, and financial services. Under his leadership, his 400-plus person team continues to help brands navigate an increasingly complex sports and entertainment ecosystem, turning passion into performance. And now, here's my conversation with Lou. All right, Lou, good morning.
Good morning, Dina. Great to be with you.
Same here. I'm excited to talk with you. So I know for our audience who may not be familiar with your role, can you share a little bit more of what you oversee at Octagon and what drives your marketing philosophy?
It's easy to think about our business in 2 parts. One is talent representation. So, representing world-class athletes, entertainers, broadcasters, people like Steph Curry and Simone Biles. And then there's the part of the business I oversee, which I would describe as integrated brand marketing. So working with brands who have significant investments in sports and entertainment sponsorships and want to bring those sponsorships to life through creative and through activation. And then on the back end, want to, of course, measure the success of those sponsorships. So we're fortunate to have a great client roster, over 30 brands that we work with in the U.S., and 11 of the Fortune 100 among them. So companies like Delta, MasterCard, and Home Depot.
I mean, it's amazing to hear names like Steph Curry and Simone Biles and be proud of that your agency, runs the talent management for them. And, Lou, as your role of, in charge of North America, I think it's important to denote, the worldwide footprint that Octagon has as well. So with Octagon being a leader in sports marketing and talent management for more than 40 years, can you touch upon that footprint that Octagon has across the world and within the industry?
Yeah, across the world, it's about 1,000 people, working every day on behalf of brands or on behalf of talent. Great businesses and teammates in the UK and throughout Europe, as well as Asia Pacific. And then as you mentioned, about 400 strong here in the US. And so, we like to say no matter where you go in the world and what office you enter, there's an Octagon DNA.
I love that quote. Like, no matter where you go, listen, you don't even realize sometimes the agencies behind these major brands and athletes are people like you and your team at Octagon. So I bet it's pretty cool for you to go in an airport and go see your creative that your team created out there, right?
Well, I that's what I say to our teams. One of the great things about what we get to do is first the subject matter expert. The subject matter, right? It's sports, it's entertainment. It's just fun. But second, we do things and create campaigns or create experiences that fans get to touch and interact with. And, that brings people a lot of joy. So you get to experience that joy yourself, and then you get to see the work that we do to bring that joy to others. It's pretty awesome.
Right. And you touched upon the creative. So I want to dig into a little deeper on that. Because like you said, the recognition from people is great, but the recognition from the industry is even better sometimes, right? Between like Cannes Lions and SPJ and the Clio. So can you share a little bit more about Octagon's creative growth and some of the work that your agency has led for these major clients?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I think our evolution, creatively, it's really driven by client needs. They've really increased the level of investment that they're making. The cost of entry, to get into some of these major sports and entertainment sponsorships is it's hefty. And so when you're making that size of an investment, you want to make sure that it pays off. Also, you have the dynamic of just a lot of changing fan behavior. So clients have sort of a minimum expectation that we would have sports specific creative talent that could, like I said, at a minimum could consult with their other agencies, or in some cases, could actually lead that work. And we found that the combination of subject matter expertise and creativity across really every aspect of the sponsorship lifecycle can make a big difference for our clients.
Yeah, and that's something that really resonates with our ad age audience, those subject matter experts. Like I said, it's not just the talent of the athlete. It's not just the brand clout that a client has. It's bringing all of that together to be like, we are the experts in this, and this is why we produce amazing work, is what really makes agencies like Octagon stand out, right?
Yes. And so if you think about that sponsorship life cycle, right, and you need creativity and creative people at every step in that process, right? So what are we going to pick as the sponsorship that's going to do the most for our brand? There's an element of creativity there. How are we going to negotiate this deal, and how are we going to get new, different, exciting rights and assets that come with it? And then, as I mentioned, increasingly having creative planners, creatives, and producers who are themselves experts in a particular, sport or entertainment platform. They're fans first, but then when you combine their fandom and their passion with their imagination, you can get to some really great work.
Yeah, and that's, like you said, the beauty of a 400 plus person team underneath you. You get all those really niche experts who really drive the creative. And that's one of the things I've always admired about Octagon. But with that, Lou, we're going to take a quick break with a word from our sponsor.
Support for this episode comes from global sports and entertainment agency Octagon. For more than 40 years, Octagon has helped brands and athletes connect with fans through sponsorship strategy, experiential activations, and standout creative content. Recently named Sports Business Journal's 2025 Agency of the Year for Brand Consulting, the agency continues to shape the industry with ideas that spark conversation and push sports marketing forward. Learn more at octagon.com and on social media at Octagon.
And we're back. So, with that, Lou, I wanted to dig in more into the specific creatives that we wanted to chat about today, specifically with Nutrafol, because I saw that you were instrumental, you and your team instrumental in helping Nutrafol launch their first ever MLB partnership. So, how did that all come together? Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. Just that's a challenge that we absolutely love, right? There's a brand that had never made an investment before in sponsorship. And so, let's start with how can we align their brand, their business, and their audience and find the right property. And then find some moments that matter where a brand like that has the right to play. And then how are we going to bring that to life across a multi-channel brand platform? So, after looking at audience, brand, timing, duration, we picked MLB in partnership with the clients. And then, really zeroed in on this idea of, an insight around the tip of the cap, and people taking their hats on and players taking their hats on and off, fans taking their hats on and off, and like, what's the better place for a brand like that to play, and then play, in the postseason when the stakes are high. So, we're proud to help them execute their hats off campaign, and I think that's got the hallmarks of all the things that we love to do here. It's got contextual creative, right? That fits the moment that fans are it's gonna resonate with fans. We had some athlete and influencer partnerships to really bring the content and the executions to life. Really strong, like in stadium experiential, a hats off section that people had a lot of fun with, and then really just driving that out across social and other media integrations.
Yeah, it seems very simple, but like nobody's thought of a hats off campaign for a brand like Nutrafol, and specifically for the MLB, that I feel like more than any other major for sports has that more female to male split. And somebody like Nutrafol really plays with female and the male space. So it's a brilliant campaign. And like you said, it's with the experiential of that campaign that I think really paid off, right?
Yeah, and I think, we've expanded ourselves, kind of how we think about it, when we say experiential or creating experiences for fans on behalf of a brand. I mean, that can take the traditional shape of, a one-to-one, experience that somebody gets to participate in, but it can also be, how they interact with content on social media or, through a media partnership. So, hats off around MLB, great insight from our planners and then, really brought to life by creatives who love MLB, love baseball. And like I said, also producers, who in the digital and experiential and content space are, just excited to get up every morning and be thinking about how we're going to bring that to life.
Right. And like I said, with MLB and baseball being the great American pastime, like everybody loves baseball. Something I wanted to touch about that's absolutely booming right now, even though it's been around forever, is also the excitement about women's sports and how they continue to grow each day. So, can you speak about some of Octagon's work within the range of women's sports and how you've helped certain brands invest and stand out in this growing landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. What an exciting and also like rapidly evolving space. As you said, it has been around for a while, and we've got great legacy, right? We've represented female athletes since the start of the agency. We represent some incredible female athletes and broadcasters today, and then we're working with brands who were first movers in the space, like Mastercard. And, I would say we talked about subject matter expertise and being creative across the sponsorship life cycle. And I think that is even more important when you're trying to enter and activate in women's sports, right? You've got rising valuations and rights fees. And now there's like a very much an expanded list of options for brands to pick from. It's also an audience that can spot interlopers about a mile away. So, for us, it's again, how do we have female strategists, planners, creatives, and producers who are also themselves fans? That's important. And then, I think about a couple of examples. You know, Nick's professional makeup, new to sponsorship, and also wanted a women's sports strategy, not a sports strategy, but a women's sports strategy. So for them, we started with the New York Liberty and Angel City FC, two like pillars in the women's sports ecosystem and in major markets that were of importance to Knicks. And then we expanded, to some ambassadors, including Juju Watkins, who became the first college athlete to be the face of a major makeup campaign, and our ability to take advantage of, again, evolving, changing landscape, and NIL, and to use a college athlete as the face of a campaign was never been done before. That really helped them break through. Then for MasterCard, a client that we work with that already has an established sponsorship portfolio, including women's sports investments in Rugby World Cup, the Billie Jean King Cup, and Arsenal Women, among others. We really wanted to work with them and other partners to have a demonstration of their commitment to women's sports. So, our insight there and the barrier that we wanted to remove that fans face is that for every 9 pieces of a men's league or team merchandise sold, there's only one for their women's counterparts. So that led us down the path of, merchandise and retail into this idea of transforming Regent Street in London into a hub for women's sports with a pop-up retail shop exclusively focused on women's sports. We integrated 30 women-owned businesses who are solving real problems for both professional athletes and grassroots athletes in women's sports. And then in that space, we programmed watch parties, panel discussions, did some research initiatives, and of course had live entertainment. So just a very impactful demonstration by a brand who has a very deep and strong commitment to women's sports.
As a woman myself who loves sports, it's so great to hear something like that because it's true. You mentioned working with Simone Biles and even other gymnasts like Ali Reisman and now soccer with Trinity Rodman. I feel like with women's sports, it always peaks during those key times of World Cup Olympics, but now it's almost been the trend of the past 10 years where those peaks have really leveled out and women's sports has stayed at the top. So having your partners like Nix and MasterCard recognize that and want that and want to tap into that is so important for the future of women's sports too.
Yeah, agreed. I couldn't agree more.
And then with that too, I mentioned the Olympics. Octagon's doing some really great things in 2026 because it's a huge year for sports. Like we have the Super Bowl, as always, at the top of the year. The World Cup is coming to North America and the Winter Olympics as well. So what trends are you and your team watching? And how could the sponsors of these major events remain front and center? And then on the flip side, also those who aren't official sponsors who can come in there and work around these major events.
I think it goes without saying, it's a great time to be working in sports. And, we like to say it's a great time to be us. We've got 3 clients who will be active around Winter Olympics and 5 around FIFA World Cup. And across that work, there's a few trends. There's this idea of connected fan experiences. So how can brands play a role in just seamlessly connecting and delivering campaigns, content, experiences at every touch point, in that fan journey? Now more than ever, there's, multiple ways and opportunities to target those fans. The other is, we've talked about it a bunch already, just how do you lean into athlete and creator-led content as a distribution channel? And then a third, I would say, we're really looking at, how can we use data and how can you use AI to personalize experiences for people in new ways? And then for some clients, it's very important. The fourth thing I would talk about is this idea of legacy and community impact. What are you doing around those major events to leave a legacy, to leave a big impact in the communities where you do business? So those are 4 kind of key things, that we're working with clients on. And then, you asked about like, what do you do if you're not a sponsor? I think there's really 2 routes to consider. One is you got to get creative, and you got to do that, within the laws sort of relating to the proper use of intellectual property. But I think a lot of the same principles still apply. Look for smart partnerships. And in the case of a non-sponsor, probably would lean more towards those athletes or influencer type of partnerships. There's a array of media opportunities out there to consider and to partner with. And then again, I think it's all about like leaning in, finding where your brand has the right to play in and around those big events, and then delivering against that. The other way would be to just simply pivot, right? Like there's no doubt World Cup is just going to dominate the culture for 6 weeks. So if you're not invested in FIFA World Cup already, something that we've looked at for clients is to, as I said, pivot to things that are much more grassroots, much more community oriented. And that might take the form of something like youth sports, right? Yes, World Cup's going to dominate culture, but people are going to go on living their lives. So, their kids' games, their kids' activities, fairs, festivals, in your local markets. If you're a brand, that's very family focused, and you do business in a lot of different markets, something like youth sports could be a good pivot, so you kind of go smaller and, grassroots while others are playing, at kind of the mega and global event level.
Yeah, the grassroots, campaigns always fascinate me around the Super Bowl specifically because, you have your premier Super Bowl sponsors, those who are broadcasting on linear, but then you also have those who work around the IP, like the big game and sponsoring different halftimes that they're doing on streaming on a YouTube, or even the Puppy Bowl, how that's been a cultural zeitgeist as well. So it's getting those sponsors around those different moments because, as you mentioned, we love sports. Not everybody loves sports. So there might be some people at the grocery store while the Super Bowl is happening, and you also want to tap into that audience. So I always find it fascinating this time of year.
It is a fascinating time of year. And, one of the things that we, say with clients is sports and entertainment, the possibilities are kind of endless, and the direction that you take or the strategy that you pick, you have a lot of choice. And, just because you're not the main sponsor or the official sponsor doesn't mean that you can't find a way in.
Louis, you took the words out of my mouth because I would say to people all the time, whether it's sports or regular media entertainment, somebody's being entertained in some way. And as long as you keep consumers entertained, they will continue to come back time and time again.
Yeah, I agree. And for us, that entertainment also, takes us usually in the path of like, how can we add value to the fan experience? How can we remove a barrier, that exists that makes something less enjoyable, or how can we make it more enjoyable? So as long as you're doing that, you're on the right track.
Exactly. Well, with that, Lou, that's all the time that we have today, because as we say, it's the marketer's brief, so we keep it brief around here. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on this very exciting time in sports and all the fantastic work that Octagon has been doing.
Thanks, Tina. Appreciate it.
And with that was Lou Kovacs, President of Marketing for North America at Octagon. Thanks to our production team of Lisa, Lauren, and Isabel on the back end, and thanks to you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the Marketer's Brief podcast on your favorite platform. We'll keep it brief, or at least short enough for you to finish before your next meeting. Thanks for tuning in.